What would you do if you discovered that someone you trusted, someone you called a friend, had been carrying a secret hatred for you for 2 decades? Tonight's story takes us to the quiet suburb of Millbrook, Pennsylvania. Population, just under 12,000. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where Friday night football games are sacred, and where your reputation in high school can follow you for the rest of your life. In July of 2019, the Millbrook High School class of 1999 gathered for their 20-year reunion. Old friends reconnected. Former sweethearts rekindled flames. And one attendee walked through those gymnasium doors with something far darker than nostalgia on their mind. Murder.
Welcome to Nightmare Crimes, where every story blurs the line between fact and fear. Some say they're true, others hope they're not. We don't decide, you do. Subscribe and step into the unknown.
Tonight, we're diving deep into the case that shocked a small town and exposed the deadly consequences of secrets, envy, and a grudge that had been festering for 2 entire decades. This is the story of the Millbrook Reunion Murder. To understand what happened on that warm July evening in 2019, we need to go back, way back, to the halls of Millbrook High School in the late 1990s. At the center of our story are 4 friends who, during their time at Millbrook High, were practically inseparable. They called themselves the Golden Four, a name that, looking back now, carries a bitter irony. First, there was Derek Holloway. Tall, athletic, captain of the varsity football team. Derek was the kind of guy who seemed to have everything handed to him. Good looks, wealthy parents, a smile that could light up a room. By graduation, he had a full athletic scholarship to Penn State and a future that seemed limitless. Then there was Jessica Monroe, homecoming queen, editor of the school newspaper. The girl every guy wanted to date and every girl wanted to be. Jessica wasn't just beautiful. She was sharp, ambitious, and fiercely competitive. She and Derek dated on and off throughout high school, creating a power couple that dominated Millbrook's social scene. The third member was Marcus Webb. Unlike Derek and Jessica, Marcus didn't come from money. His father worked at the local auto plant, and his mother cleaned houses for the wealthy families on the other side of town. But what Marcus lacked in financial privilege, he made up for in raw intelligence. He was valedictorian of the class of 1999, with a near-perfect SAT score and acceptance letters from multiple Ivy League schools. And finally, there was Tyler Brennan. Tyler was, in many ways, the outlier of the group. He wasn't an athlete like Derek, wasn't as academically gifted as Marcus, didn't possess Jessica's social magnetism. So how did he end up in the inner circle? Simple. Tyler was funny. He was the comic relief. The guy who could make everyone laugh, who lightened the mood, who was always ready with a joke or a prank. But here's the thing about being the funny one in a group of exceptional people. Sometimes, you start to wonder if they're laughing with you or at you. According to interviews conducted after the events of 2019, their high school dynamics seemed, on the surface, like any other close-knit friend group. They went to parties together, studied together, spent weekends at Derek's family cabin by Lake Marion. But beneath the surface, tensions simmered. Tyler, as several classmates would later recall, always seemed to be trying just a little too hard. He was desperate for validation, particularly from Derek, who he seemed to idolize. One former classmate, speaking anonymously to investigators, said, "Tyler worshipped Derek. It was almost uncomfortable to watch. And I think Derek knew it. I think he liked having someone around who made him feel even more important." But it wasn't just Derek who Tyler craved approval from. Jessica Monroe, according to multiple sources, was the object of Tyler's secret affection for years. He never told her, never made a move. Because how could he? Jessica was Derek's girl. And Tyler was just the funny friend. March of 1999, 3 months before graduation. This is where things start to unravel. The annual Millbrook High School talent show was approaching, and Tyler had been working on a comedy routine for months. This was going to be his moment. His chance to prove he was more than just Derek Holloway's sidekick. But the night before the show, something happened. Tyler had written his routine in a notebook, the same notebook he carried everywhere. Jokes about teachers, about school policies, about the absurdity of high school social hierarchies. And somehow, that notebook ended up in Derek's hands. What happened next would become the defining moment of Tyler Brennan's life. The next day, at a house party at Jessica's home, Derek stood up in front of 30 of their classmates and began reading from Tyler's notebook. But he didn't just read the jokes. He read everything. The private thoughts, the insecurities, and worst of all, the pages and pages Tyler had written about his feelings for Jessica. By the time Derek was finished, Tyler Brennan was a broken man standing in the middle of a room full of laughing teenagers. Jessica, according to witnesses, didn't laugh. She looked mortified, but she also didn't stop it. She didn't say a word. Marcus Webb would later tell investigators that he left the party early because he couldn't watch anymore. It was cruel, Marcus said. Derek made Tyler into a complete joke. And the worst part? I think Derek thought it was just good fun. He never understood what he did that night. Tyler Brennan didn't attend the talent show. He barely spoke for the rest of the school year. And at graduation, when the Golden Four were supposed to take one last photo together, Tyler was nowhere to be found. 20 years. For 20 years, that humiliation sat inside Tyler Brennan like a tumor, growing, metastasizing into something dark and unrecognizable. But let's fast forward to 2019. The four members of the Golden Four had gone their separate ways, as high school friends often do. But their lives had taken dramatically different paths. Derek Holloway, after a promising start at Penn State, Derek blew out his knee in his junior year. His football career ended before it ever really began. He returned to Millbrook, took over his father's real estate business, and by 2019, he was one of the wealthiest men in town. He was married to a woman named Candace, had 3 children, and served on the city council. On paper, his life was perfect. But those who knew Derek well said something had changed. The confidence had curdled into arrogance. The charm had become manipulation. He was known for ruthless business practices, for crushing competitors, for always needing to be the alpha in every room. Jessica Monroe. She had left Millbrook for New York City immediately after graduation. She worked her way up in the publishing industry, eventually becoming an editor at a major publishing house. She never married, never had children. Colleagues described her as brilliant but distant, cold even. In 2018, she was diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer. She underwent treatment, went into remission, and decided, perhaps for the first time in her life, to reconnect with her past. When the invitation for the 20-year reunion arrived, she was on a plane to Pennsylvania within the week. Marcus Webb, he had done exactly what everyone expected. Graduated from Columbia, got his MBA, became a successful investment banker in Boston. But in 2015, at the height of his career, Marcus had what he later described as a complete breakdown. The pressure, the hours, the emptiness of accumulating wealth for its own sake. He quit his job, moved back to Pennsylvania, and started a non-profit organization that provided scholarships to underprivileged students from small towns, students like the one he had once been. He RSVP'd yes to the reunion without hesitation. He saw it as an opportunity to make peace with his past. And then there was Tyler Brennan. After graduation, Tyler had simply disappeared. He didn't go to college, didn't attend any alumni events. His parents, when asked, said only that Tyler had gone out west and that they rarely heard from him. But records would later show that Tyler's life after Millbrook had been a slow, steady descent. He drifted from job to job. Construction work in Nevada, bartending in Arizona, a brief stint as a truck driver. He had 2 failed marriages, a bankruptcy in 2010, an arrest for assault in 2012, charges later dropped. And through it all, according to journals recovered after the events of 2019, Tyler never stopped thinking about what happened that night. They think I forgot. They moved on with their perfect lives, and they think I just forgot. But I remember every word, every laugh. I remember the look on her face. I remember everything. And one day, they'll remember too. That entry was dated March 2019, 4 months before the reunion. When the invitation arrived at Tyler's small apartment in Reno, Nevada, he didn't hesitate. He RSVP'd yes. He bought a plane ticket. And he began planning. July 13th, 2019. The Millbrook High School gymnasium had been transformed. Streamers in the school colors, blue and gold. A DJ playing the greatest hits of the late 1990s. A photo booth with props and a banner that read Class of '99, 20 years strong. By 7 p.m., over 100 former students had gathered, many seeing each other for the first time in 2 decades. Derek Holloway arrived in style, pulling up in a brand new Mercedes, his wife Candace on his arm. He worked the room like a politician, shaking hands, slapping backs, reminding everyone that he was still the king of Millbrook. Jessica Monroe arrived alone. She was thinner than people remembered, her face marked by the toll of her cancer treatment. But she carried herself with the same quiet elegance she'd always possessed. Marcus Webb spent most of the early evening catching up with former teachers, including Mrs. Patterson, who had taught AP English and had written his Columbia recommendation letter. And Tyler Brennan? No one noticed when he slipped through the side door at 7:45 p.m. He had gained weight since high school. His hair had thinned. He wore a baggy suit that didn't quite fit. If anyone had looked closely, they might have noticed the distant look in his eyes. But no one looked closely at Tyler Brennan. No one ever had for the first few hours. The reunion proceeded without incident. Around 9 p.m., the organizing committee called for everyone's attention. They were going to present a memorial slideshow honoring classmates who had passed away in the 20 years since graduation. 7 names. 7 faces. A sobering reminder that time spares no one. After the slideshow, Derek Holloway took the microphone. "I'd like to make a toast," he announced. "To the class of '99. We may have gotten older, but we've never stopped being the greatest class Millbrook has ever seen." Cheers erupted. Glasses raised. But from the corner of the gymnasium, Tyler Brennan watched in silence. At approximately 9:30 p.m., according to witness statements, Tyler approached Derek Holloway for the first time that evening. The conversation, such as it was, lasted less than 2 minutes. Several people overheard fragments. "Tyler. Man, is that you? I barely recognized you." "Yeah, it's me. 20 years, right? 20 years. Wild. Hey, you still doing that comedy thing? You were always the funny one." The funny one. After all this time, after everything, Derek Holloway still saw Tyler Brennan as nothing more than the comic relief. Tyler said something else. Witnesses couldn't agree on what, and then walked away. Derek reportedly laughed and turned back to his conversation with a group of former teammates. At 10:15 p.m., something unusual happened. Jessica Monroe received a text message. She checked her phone, frowned, and then excused herself from the conversation she was having with 2 former cheerleaders. That text, which investigators would later recover, read, "We need to talk. Meet me at the equipment room near the old gym. Come alone. Tyler." Jessica hesitated for only a moment before heading toward the back of the gymnasium. Why did she go? Perhaps curiosity. Perhaps guilt over what had happened 20 years ago. Perhaps she simply underestimated the danger. We'll never know for certain what was going through her mind. The equipment room was located in the older section of the school, past the main gymnasium, down a dimly lit hallway that hadn't been renovated in decades. Jessica found the door unlocked. She stepped inside. What happened in that room over the next 45 minutes remains, to this day, partially unclear. What we know is this. When Jessica Monroe was found at 11:02 p.m., she was unconscious on the floor of the equipment room, suffering from blunt force trauma to the head and multiple stab wounds to her torso. She was barely alive. But she was not the only victim. At 10:47 p.m., Derek Holloway had received his own text message. "Jess is hurt. Equipment room. Hurry." The message appeared to come from Jessica's phone. Derek told his wife he'd be right back and rushed toward the back of the building. He never made it to the equipment room. His body was found in the hallway, approximately 30 feet from the equipment room door. He had been stabbed 17 times. The brutality of the attack suggested not just intent to kill, but rage. Years of compressed, concentrated rage. Derek Holloway was pronounced dead at the scene. When Marcus Webb came looking for his friends at 11 p.m., he was the one who discovered the horror. He found Derek first, then Jessica. His screams brought the entire reunion to a standstill. Within minutes, the Millbrook High School gymnasium was transformed from a celebration into a crime scene. Local police arrived at 11:08 p.m. State police were called in by 11:30 p.m. By midnight, the FBI had been notified due to the high-profile nature of the case and the possibility that the perpetrator might attempt to flee across state lines. Because Tyler Brennan was gone. In the chaos that followed the discovery of the bodies, no one noticed Tyler slip out the same side door he had entered hours earlier. His rental car, a gray Toyota Camry, was missing from the school parking lot. An all-points bulletin was issued immediately, but the investigation was just beginning. Detectives began the painstaking process of interviewing over 100 reunion attendees. The picture that emerged was both revealing and tragic. Multiple witnesses confirmed the interaction between Tyler and Derek. The text messages were quickly traced. And then, investigators found Tyler's hotel room. What they discovered there would prove central to the prosecution's case. Inside room 217 of the Millbrook Motor Lodge, investigators found Item 1. A notebook containing detailed plans for the evening, including floor layouts of the school, timing notes, and a handwritten list with 3 names, Derek, Jessica, and Marcus, each followed by specific locations within the school. Item 2. A hunting knife, still in its packaging, purchased at a sporting goods store in Reno 3 weeks prior. Forensic analysis would later confirm this was not the murder weapon, leading investigators to conclude Tyler had brought multiple knives. Item 3. A laptop computer containing a folder labeled Justice. Inside were hundreds of documents, photographs, and video clips, all related to Derek Holloway, Jessica Monroe, and Marcus Webb. Tyler had been tracking their lives for years. Item 4. A USB drive containing a video, a suicide note of sorts, in which Tyler explained everything. I want to share some of what Tyler said in that video, because it reveals the depth of his obsession and the tragedy of a life consumed by a single moment. For 20 years, I've replayed that night in my head. Every single day, I wake up and I hear the laughter. I go to sleep and I see their faces. Derek, Jessica, Marcus, they destroyed me, and they didn't even care enough to remember. I was nothing to them. Just the funny guy, the sidekick, the joke. Well, I'm not laughing anymore. After tonight, no one's going to forget Tyler Brennan. The manhunt for Tyler Brennan lasted 4 days. He was apprehended at a rest stop near the Pennsylvania-Ohio border on July 17, 2019. He had been sleeping in his rental car, having apparently made no real effort to flee. When officers approached his vehicle, he was awake. He was reading a book. The book was his own high school yearbook. Tyler Brennan was taken into custody without incident. He made one statement to arresting officers. Is Derek dead? When told that Derek Holloway had died at the scene, Tyler reportedly closed his eyes and said, "Good." Jessica Monroe, against all odds, survived. She underwent emergency surgery to repair a collapsed lung and spent 3 weeks in the ICU. The head trauma resulted in partial memory loss. She has no recollection of the attack itself. She would later testify at Tyler's trial, though her testimony was limited by her injuries. When asked if she had any message for Tyler Brennan, Jessica declined to answer. Marcus Webb was never physically harmed that night, but those who know him say he has never recovered. He was the intended third victim. The notebook found in Tyler's hotel room made that clear. Tyler had planned to lure Marcus to a third location within the school after finishing with Derek and Jessica. But Tyler's timeline had been disrupted. Jessica had taken longer to subdue than expected. Derek had arrived earlier than planned, and by the time Tyler was ready to move on to his third target, Marcus had already discovered the bodies. In the chaos that followed, Tyler made the decision to flee. Marcus Webb has not spoken publicly about the events of that night. He has declined all interview requests. His nonprofit organization continues to operate, but friends say he is a changed man. He carries it with him, one friend told reporters. Every day, the guilt of being the one who survived the trial of Tyler James Brennan began on March 2, 2020. He was charged with first-degree murder in the death of Derek Holloway and attempted first-degree murder in the attack on Jessica Monroe. The prosecution's case was straightforward. This was premeditated murder, planned for months, executed with precision and cruelty. Tyler Brennan had traveled across the country with the express intent of killing his former friends. The evidence was overwhelming. The video confession left no doubt about intent. They sought the death penalty. Pause. The defense, led by public defender Sarah Chun, took a different approach. Tyler Brennan, they argued, was a deeply broken man who had suffered a psychological fracture 20 years earlier and never recovered. The humiliation he endured in high school had caused lasting trauma. He had been diagnosed with complex PTSD, major depressive disorder, and what one expert witness called obsessive rumination disorder. Tyler Brennan has been serving a life sentence since 1999, Chin told the jury. A life sentence of shame, isolation, and psychological torment. What happened that night was wrong. It was tragic. It was criminal. But it was the act of a man who was already destroyed, acting out in the only way his broken mind could conceive. The defense did not deny the facts of the case. They could not. What they asked for was mercy. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Over 40 witnesses testified. Former classmates spoke about the party in 1999. Psychologists debated the nature of trauma and responsibility. Tyler Brennan himself took the stand. Against his attorney's advice, Tyler Brennan made a choice. A terrible, irrevocable choice. And he will spend the rest of his life paying for it. But this story should also make us think. About the words we say without thinking. About the jokes that aren't really jokes. About the person in the room who laughs along because they don't know what else to do. Tyler Brennan is currently incarcerated at State Correctional Institution, Graterford in Pennsylvania. He has made no public statements since his sentencing. Jessica Monroe has returned to New York City. She published a memoir in 2022, but it focused on her cancer journey rather than the events of that night. She has never spoken in detail about Tyler Brennan or the attack. Marcus Webb continues his work with underprivileged students. He has funded a new program specifically focused on mental health support for teenagers. The Millbrook High School class of 1999 has not held a reunion since. Thank you for watching Nightmare Crimes. If this story affected you, I encourage you to reach out to someone. Talk about what you're carrying. You don't have to carry it alone. Stay safe out there. And remember, the past has a longer reach than we know. Like, share, and subscribe for more.